maximum for managing the compliance. What I predominantly see is when I speak to immigration heads or the mobility heads in various companies, when you talk about compliance review or an audit, they are usually kind of not open to carry out an audit. Unless it comes from an internal audit person or a chief risk officer, they really don't open up. So they kind of get into a defensive mode. I think that mindset has to change. Unless until that mindset changes, probably they will not be well prepared. So that would be the first and foremost, I think, from a concept perspective that they need to change. And then it talks about basically what are the things that you need to do to really be prepared for being audited. So no one is accepted, so anyone could be audited, any firm could be audited. So we need to be prepared for that. And then first and foremost is you need to look at your process. That's the first line of defense. What kind of process do you have? Is there any potential gap in the process? How do you plug that? Do you have proper documentation defined to carry out the process and then ensure there's no loopholes in this process? The second line would be primarily to kind of look at what kind of internal review that you carry out. I mean, within the immigration team, there are a couple of companies where they have a internal compliance team which monitors on a daily basis about what the operations team does, and then kind of see where the gaps are and kind of come up with a mechanism to kind of put controls in place. I guess it's important for every organization now to kind of look into having your own internal compliance team. That would be critical. And the third line would be for your own internal audit team or the risk team to have review a process, then identify any potential gap, because it's like a make a checker process. I mean, any work that we do, it's kind of human tendency to have errors. So you need a third person to kind of look into it. And then the final one, on the main important point is you want someone third party or an external person, external agency who has no interest in the organization to kind of review the process. I think that's very critical, because unless until you have a completely external perspective looking, it could be a law firm or an autonomous service provider who has to probably look into it and then kind of help you prepare. So unless until you carry out these steps, probably it's not going to be that easy to say, okay, we have enough sufficient controls and process in place which will help us detect potential blank spot and then address those blank spots. So I would say these are the 4 key steps that you need to probably take to kind of be well prepared for an audit. So I think once they're an audit, then obviously a couple of steps that other organizations need to take. Maybe Swati can probably throw some light on that.
Yeah, before we get to Swati, question for you, Rajesh. So how often would you recommend that companies run their own internal audits?
Good question. So I would say a full-blown audit at least once a year, maybe on a periodic basis, quarterly basis, on the regular simple stuff should be carried out. So it has to be routine. You can't say, okay, I carried out an audit this year, let me wait for 2-3 years, because anything could have happened in the 2-3 year period.
And I guess it depends a lot on the size and the number of employees you have as well, and the various locations that are involved.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And you talked about getting third parties to do it. I think for all employers, they would realize that third parties would possibly also include the attorneys who represent them. Sometimes companies are large enough, and we are fortunate enough to deal with some of those companies, where they may have more than one law firm working on their cases, in which case it may not be a bad idea to have not the same law firm auditing the cases, but have the other law firm auditing the cases, just to get a fresh perspective or just to get a different perspective. As an example, I can tell you that when I've gone and actually done audits, typically of documents that have not been prepared by our law firm, and it's possible the other law firm may find similar gaps when they audit our documents. It's possible. Yeah. You will find that typically if you're looking at a public access file and you have an LCA and you've got documentation supporting the LCA, the documentation, if it's been sent as a sample, may just sit in the file as a sample. It's not completed, it's not signed, it's not dated. Those are gaps that will need to be reviewed. And when you're conducting an internal audit, you should be honest enough to look at those and give that feedback. Okay? Swati, coming to you. Now you're the subject of an audit. You've got somebody knocking on your door. You know, you've had your cup of tea. You're not going to offer him a cup of tea or her a cup of tea. What do you do next?
So before I say what I do next, I can also talk about what kind of audits that usually employers go through. One is the audit might be directly for you as an organization. A second could be one of your clients is getting audited, because of which the client in turn comes back to you asking for more details. So these are some of the kind of audits that we go through. Now, the moment I know that there's an audit that's come up, I would first go and engage an
So
attorney.
can I interrupt you? Would you
Sure.
draw a difference between, in your processes, when it's you who's being audited versus your client that's being audited?
Um, it would definitely be a slight difference, but then end of the day, I would have to still answer in terms of documentation what I would have. So I would first go and ensure that I understand what is the audit happening about, ask the right questions and get a clarity. I would then engage an attorney and create a comprehensive panel of internal team which covers everybody, right from the legal team to the payroll team to the HR team, so that everybody is aware what kind of question or what is the audit about. What is it that we need to give? When it comes to documents, I would only prefer to give what is asked rather than giving documents which are not yet been asked for. So if I'm being asked for an LCA document, I provide an LCA document and not the entire PF. So these will be some of the steps that we do, and then we do a kind of a mock session before we go out and respond to the audit, saying these are the kind of questions we anticipate. This is going to be answered by the payroll team. This is going to be answered by the immigration team. This is going to be answered by the HR. And hence, build a very clear response rather than keeping it more vague, or try to not to anticipate the question and build an answer on the ask.
So, you work for a very large company. How do you guys set up your audit or the audit process in terms of, like you correctly said, you've got payroll, you've got HR. Do you differentiate in terms of helping the audience set up their own processes, their internal processes? Would you keep the files separate? Would you mix them? Or if you did keep them separate, which ones would you keep separate?
In terms of an internal process, as Rajesh said, we already have a compliance team which runs on top of each of the service line or each of the team. So this internal compliance team ensures that we have easy access to the documents. So we have a centralized ERD wherein all the documents related to the employee are placed with right accesses to the right stakeholders. So when in terms of an audit, this compliance team has access to this ERD tool which goes up and pulls up the right documents required, so that internally, even though we have separate individual teams, we have a centralized document repository from where we can access the data.
So how quickly would you be able to pull it up and print it if there was an officer who came in and asked you for documentation? Because you're going to have limited time.
Yeah.
And they may or may not be accommodating in terms of how much time they're going to give you to provide the documentation. Sometimes actually we found them to be pretty reasonable in terms of if you ask for time, especially the larger size companies have many, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands, and all the documentation may not be ready. So I think you may get some time, but I think the better approach is, as Rajesh suggested, setting it up, having it ready, and then maybe it's just a function of printing it, which can be a challenge in itself, but I think at least it's ready.
Yeah, so agreeing that we have teams which are divided in terms of geos, the panel that we create to respond to the audit will be responsible to ensure that we keep up with the time, and depending on whatever our attorney suggests us, if we need to ask for more time, we proactively ask for more time before we respond to the question, buy the time and ensure that internally we gear up to give the response.
What happens when the person walks into the door and the brand new temp who's sitting over there at the front has no clue of what the officer is talking about? And what's your backup plan?
Okay.
How should they create a backup plan when the officer walks in and it's Rohit's first hour at the job and his first experience is seeing this officer? What am I supposed to be doing? What's your internal process for that?
So frankly speaking, communication to employees is something that we've been following as one of the major proactive steps. We have when it comes to US, we have our team in the US operations team who has a very clear weekly call, which is an open house for any employee to come and ask for a question, wherein the operations team assists them with a respective answer. So these are also education sessions which our teams carry out answer to the queries that the employees have, and also use it to educate the members who've joined on the call. So it's more of a proactive communication in various methodologies. It could be through email, it could be a mass communication, it is the HR going into a particular client site, talking to the employees, as well as the weekly calls that we have with the respective employees. We don't have all the stakeholders on the call. We take the question, and majorly our operation leads handle these calls. So it depends on the type of the question. Whichever question can be answered right there, or if there is a response given in terms of what the employee needs to do, that's what is usually done, rather than getting into the details of the particular question, because there might be certain private questions asked. Yes, yes.
Accordingly. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thanks.
How do you deal with situations where you as HR, and I think this comes up frequently for all of us, whether it's an attorney, whether it's an employer, what do you do when your employees go on vacation? They're not required to report their vacation time into you, but they've come back and you're not quite sure where they are at that point in time. If the officer comes in, finds, Rohit's not at his desk and you have no idea where he is. Any backups that you try to create for that? And it's not a perfect situation. We're just discussing this to kind of bring up issues that I think most of us see on a regular basis. And there may not be a perfect answer, but we just wanted to share some of our thoughts with you so that it's helpful to you. So how do you manage that part? You've got two situations there, right? One, the individual is on vacation, is not to be found. You're not quite sure where he is. He may have asked for vacation. Sometimes there are emergencies where people may or may not be informed. You've got a second situation where the person has gone on vacation, or maybe otherwise has traveled outside, comes back, goes to a different location. Would you like to address that part?
I think on the first part, I'm not very sure when it comes to an employee being on leave and not being found. But then on the second question, like what we have tried to do is in terms of system automation, getting technology as an intervention. We have various checks and balances put into each of the applications, like it could be a time entry record application, it could be a leave application, which talk to each other. It is also a travel application, wherein we ensure, or we keep the HR informed if there is an employee who's not filled time for a particular set of time. There is a notification that goes to the HR, this employee has not been filling time. So we have certain checks and balances where people can go and look at whether there is something that we need to pay attention to, so that the reporting managers and the HRs are notified about it in terms of presence of the employee, in terms of where the employee is. We capture a worksite address to understand for which worksite is the employee filling time.
Okay, that's very helpful. And how do you?
Just to add on to
Yeah,
that,
please go ahead.
I think one probably what you can do is you should educate the front office, because they're the first line, the first people who connect with the auditors who come in. The front office guys should know whom to contact. It could be usually the first thing they'll do is contact the facilities manager, or who's in charge of the admin, or who's monitoring the front office section. So you should probably give them a list for what kind of issues who should contact. So usually it's the legal team or the HR team. So they should be first point of contact or escalation point of contact. So if you have that, the people whom should we contact, I think it's best. Probably, if not the immigration team, maybe good to kind of connect with the legal team, because they would be dealing with various other notices from the government. They would know how to contact and what should be done. How to really manage the audit perspective, and then connect back with you folks, the immigration folks.
So you do have a backup system that you need to create in place?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Satya, turning to you, you may have the most exciting perspective for everybody around over here. Share some of your thoughts, what you've seen as the challenges at your end from the consulate perspective, the embassy perspective, and how would you get an employee also ready for dealing with an audit besides just the employer?
Sure, Rohit. See, it's very interesting. So let me, before I even speak anything about that, let me ask the audience a question, and maybe, Jake, if you can just do a very quick poll on that. So my question is, how many of you think is US visa the most difficult one or the most easiest one to get? Or maybe you can just raise a hand if you think that it is the most difficult one to get.
Well, we're talking about the H1s and the L1s, so that's, okay, focus on the H.
H's, B's, or any
Yeah.
category. So what is the general opinion here?
It's probably a mixed bag of goodies or baddies, whatever you want to call it.
Easy,
but,
difficult,
yeah.
maybe you don't know. Okay, let's see what the response is like. Oh boy, that's interesting. 50-50.
Okay, 50-50.
Oh boy,
Okay.
okay.
They just want you to talk. They don't want to deal with this. Yeah.
Okay, so let me make a statement here. I would say the US visas, any category, period, are the most easiest one to get. In 30 seconds to 3 minutes, you may get a visa which is valid and good to work for over 3 years. A B1, B2 visa which is good to travel for 10 years. And the time they take to adjudicate that is between 30 seconds to 3 minutes. That's it. No other country issues a visa like this. No other country processes a visa like this. So, what do we kind of interpret is whatever you say at the window, they trust you. So that's the key, is they always trust you. If they ask you for a document, whatever you provide is they trust you. And based on that, they decide and issue a visa. So when they trust you and there is a breach of trust, they take that very, very, very seriously. And that breach of trust is what is written there at my back, is that compliance. So if you fail to be compliant with the US laws or the immigration laws, then they will take it very, very, very seriously, trust me. So earlier, maybe years back, they did not have a definitive program. The State Department did not have it, but they have a well-defined fraud prevention program which runs out of DC, and that is the charges you pay $500. Fraud prevention fee, so they have also built up money which they can spend and hire people, and those are the people usually knock at your US doors to see that you are compliant. So it is as easy, and even I will again say, being compliant is also very easy. In the sense, is what you commit to them. Again, we are talking about HS. So when we do LCA, what do? We make a commitment. We present that documents. We put information as what we are going to do. So we are making a commitment from the corporation side. So they will ensure is what you have said, that you are making that happen. And again, if you do not make it happen, then they will take it very seriously. So those are the times when any corporation will see those people, do not get scared. So what I'm saying is there will be some compliances which are to be met. They are not at all very complicated. So it is as simple as that, keeping your LCA records, keeping your wage records. As simple as that, did you make an effort to hire equally qualified US citizen? Or the citizen was not displaced by when you hired an H-1B. So these are very, very simple stuff. But at the same time, when you are trying to prove that, do you have a documentary evidence? If you do not have it, then how do you prove it? Because whatever investigation may happen, the burden of proof is always onto you. So if you are not able to present it strongly with a supporting document, then you may lose a case, although you may have done it. So usually what they see is, if a violation is made, was it an oversight? Was it substantial? Or was it willful? or willful and substantial? If it was an oversight, did you make an effort to correct it? So I will slightly disagree with Rajesh here. He mentioned that, of course, it's too early, and he said that his company maybe, and he proposes that audit should be done once a year. I'm saying it could be too late. So if you do it regularly, I leave it up to you how regularly you want to do it. So if you notice, and it is not a willful default, so sooner you correct it, better chances you have. And they also take it into consideration is if it was an oversight, not a willful thing, and you made an effort, they are very lenient on that. Seriously. And if you are able to prove that you made those corrections, or you made those things go in a right direction, and if you are able to provide that with a documentary support, so your case becomes easier. So what three things I would focus is being compliance is what are the key things you should be doing, what are the key records you should be maintaining in support, and based on these two things, when the CIS or it is from the Department of Labor, or eventually if it is ICE guy who knocks the door, so they are just going to evaluate only these things, and based on their determination, maybe if we have time, I can just run a couple of slides if it is there.
Yeah, sure. And before you run the slides, Satya, I was wondering if you might be able to just share with the audience some examples of the kinds of questions that an employee may be asked during a site visit, or even the employer may be asked during a site visit.
So from the employee side, it is as simple as that because it is a compliance issue. Maybe if you can, Rohit, run the first slide, it's listed there, and it becomes so easier.
Oh, that's your slide, right?
Yeah.
No, it's not this one. Jake, do you have a slide? Yeah, no, his slide, Satya's slide. Do they have your slide?
I did give it. Anyway, if it is a technology issue, then I can just speak on that.
Yeah, well, they're trying to get it up because I know
Yeah.
you've already told me.
So
10 minutes.
absolutely, so for the corporate is, eventually they will ask the questions is, do you have records about LCA? So do you have it? So as my colleague was just saying that, okay, when somebody, and Rohit was bringing it up, can we say, no, I don't have it, or maybe I'll give it later. But you are mandated by law to keep those records. So if you are keeping those records, you might as well make it available. So you may not be able to give all the records, maybe due to some reason, but eventually you have to show some records, and that's the first basis. And if you are able to present that well in the first time, I think you do not have to worry at all on anything. The second thing is, of course, again, it is there on the LCA about the wages. Is the H-1B worker getting the wages what you promised in the documents what you presented to USCIS, or whatever the job responsibilities were for the worker is doing the same job, and whatever location you mentioned, the worker is found to be working there. So these are very, very simple. These are the things which you promised. So there is nothing very, very technical, very key things if you maintain that. So these are the very, very simple 3 or 4 documents only which you have to just present when somebody comes knocking at the door. And if all those things are there, maybe a pay stub of something, are you maintaining those records, social security and stuff? If those things are there, trust me, most of your headache is gone.
Yeah, I think we'll start taking questions because I'm being told I'm almost out of time. But just one quick note that I would like to share is, while just make sure that any records you're maintaining are being consistently maintained, especially in terms of retention timelines. If there are certain documents you do not need to maintain after a certain period of time, such as an LCA, and you're getting rid of LCAs that have expired, make sure that you get rid of all LCAs that have expired. Don't let an officer come in and find